Perfect. Okay. Welcome to the High Diaries. This is a podcast where we talk about the weird, the wonderful, psychology, astrology, psychedelics, and all things ceremony of life. And today I am talking with Doctor of Quantum Medicine, Gary Montemayor. I'm so excited for this conversation. We're talking about healing, the nature of the body, and all of the other bodies that we have,
Mm.
and how more holistic modalities can address some of our deepest seated issues, and probably much more than that, too. So I am passing the mic over to you, Dr. Montemayor, to introduce yourself, your background, and anything else that you want to add.
Sure, sure. I've got a PhD and doctorate in natural medicine that I got from Quantum University in Honolulu, Hawaii. And it has taken me to quite a few places that I thought I'd never go uh, research-wise. And I found it to be just one of the most fascinating subjects is quantum medicine, um, which stems from the Upanishads, which are ancient Hindu texts. And as I study it more and more, I find it to be more and more fascinating. And I've come up with a framework that was taught to me by Amit Goswami. I've changed it a little bit to be understood better. But that framework, we can lay any disorder over it and be able to find the source. Um, one of I'm working on scientific papers on currently with autistic children and Alzheimer's, and how it's they actually have a deeper way of communication, and we're finding nonverbal autistic children can communicate with their caregivers um, telepathically and powerfully telepathically, and also the same has been shown. Although subjectively and not scientifically, it's been shown with Alzheimer's patients. I'm working on putting psychedelics into this particular framework, and it's what's happening is just fascinating. It's magical. It explains so much about how psychedelics work and how they work on the five bodies of consciousness. And that's one of the things that has been that drew me to you. And I actually heard your podcast before and listened to you on TikTok. I had to reach out, say, "Hey, this is good stuff," and so we got connected. So yeah, I'm really happy to be here.
And thanks for reaching out because before I met you, I had no idea about Dr. Joe Dispenza. And the reason I mention him is because I believe it's his university, is it not? Or,
He teaches there. I He was one of my teachers, along with Bruce Lipton, who is another very popular physician that is, if you will, crossed over to the side of a more quantum medicine perspective. And also Amit Goswami, who's I learned about quantum medicine in his class on the quantum doctor, which was a fascinating world of quantum physics and quantum mechanics integrated into this five bodies of consciousness. So yeah, it has been. I've had some really good academic teachers on the way, so I'm really happy to share that.
amazing. Yeah. And I, to start, I want the listener to get a good, solid foundation on this. And from my perspective, correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of this has to do with this idea of the heart and brain coherence, and how when we are in coherence with our heart and our mind, then we are able to access some of these other bodies or sheaths, as the Upanishads describe it. And within those sheaths are different aspects of our consciousness, awareness, memory, and access to even spirits, ancestors, and source, so to speak, where we can then go from the outward to heal the inward. Can you elaborate more on that?
You put that. I have a screen I'd like to share. I'm going to send a request to you, and it's a fascinating event that took place to when I used to be a deep sub pilot, a submarine pilot of the deep sea, and there was an event that happened down there that caused me to wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and create this what I call a primer, and uh, and so that's what yeah. Let's see if I can. Here we go. Yeah, it's this one right here. Okay, let me see. Whoops, sorry about that. Let me just pull it up again. Here we go. Yes. Okay. So this particular primer is it shows the five bodies, and I'm going to go over them real quick. The first is the physical body. It's the manifestation of all the other bodies. In allopathic medicine or Western medicine, uh, we the we look at it as something that we call upward causation. That means we look at the atoms and then the molecules and the molecules and the organs. The organs create systems, and then there's a neural synapse in the brain, and that is what they call consciousness, and or and we call it decision, and that's where it stops. Um, and so, but the body is not made, its source was not comes from the atoms. It comes from a higher source. And the other bodies that we have is the human biofield that surrounds us. Rupert Sheldrake, who is a famous Cambridge biologist, who I've read a lot of his stuff. Came up with something called the morphinogenic field, which means that around us, what people call the aura is what people call the vital body, the prana, the chi. He says that's where the encoded blueprints are for every cell of our body, for every organ of our body, for every system. It's encoded these blueprints, and anything that affects those blueprints, it will actually affect our DNA through a process called epigenetics. And then the next body is called the mental body, and it's broken up into two chambers. And these two chambers are, i- in my life's work, will be this me proving that this is the source of all human suffering. I learned this concept from a gentleman that was writing children's books and came out with a book uh, called "Don't Believe Everything You Think." And his name is Joseph Wynn. Fascinating book, and it's not from a scientific perspective. It's actually it's very interesting the way he's written it, and it's turned out to be an international bestseller. And I've had he's become my friend. We've talked a lot in the past, and certainly will in the future. Fascinating, very brilliant man. Anyway, he said that thought and thinking are two different things. The only time that we think about anything is when we think about a thought. And this is important because when we think, we actually are using conditioning, we're using ego, we're using habitual behaviors, we're using all that to think about a thought. And when we do, because we have 60,000 thoughts a day, and 95% of them are the same thoughts we had yesterday. 85% of them are negative. And I can keep going because 7% of those are judgments on other people, and the rest are judgments on ourselves. And of those judgments on ourselves, 50% of them are based on lies we've told ourselves and believe. And this is the problem because in downward causation, that means that our higher states of consciousness flow through the from the bliss body, which is the source, through the supermental body, which is intuition, all knowing, knowing without thinking, flows into the quantum self. Is when we quiet our mind, we're in the quantum self. But thought and thinking, which is right here, creates a a conflict, and that conflict it affects our vital body, the body around us. And when we react to something or someone, that vital body shrinks and becomes less energy and more chemistry. And that chemistry is cortisol. And we live in a society now where people come in and they'll have a high cortisol level. But then they tell me, says, Doc, I feel fine. It's because they've adapted to this high cortisol level, but we measure it and we need to get that down. We need to get that down. And 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 so one of the ways that, or many of the ways that we treat the mental body is through meditation, yoga, neurolinguistic programming. More recently learned is hypnosis. Uh, Also, qigong is a traditional Chinese medicine way of getting into a meditation, and I've added psychedelics to that. And we'll go back to that a little bit later, but I wanted to continue on with the supramental body, which is the next body up. It's considered the human soul. Um, and this is where the archetypes of love, caring, empathy, joy, appreciation, gratitude, they live there with other archetypes that we call universal truths. Another archetype is justice. Those things live there, and they're filters for our personal growth. But in the supramental body, there's a closet door, and inside that closet door, we have over here reincarnation, karma, um, ancestral wisdom, morphic resonance. Again, that we talked about. Morphic resonance is memory from our ancestors. Direct memory from our ancestors, that's being passed down. There are frequencies that are passed down. And then the higher body is called the bliss body. It's the source. It's the 0 point field. Um, it's uh, it's the ground of all being, unlimited ground of all being. And so, there's no treating that, because the the bliss body can't have a disorder. It's the source. Either can the supermental, because in religion they say that the soul was made in God's image, and this you're part of it. Um, uh, but in quantum medicine, we know that it holds an energetic value, and it's also the source of fundamental creativity, which is like the original thought. These are all really important, and these all integrate and can be uh, discussed with in the context of quantum mechanics. And so we'll do that. And one of the things that I'd like to talk about is that you mentioned is heart-brain coherence, and that's really amazing that you'd bring that up, because heart-brain coherence creates a quantum leap from the vital body to the supramental, and it bypasses the mental body where the conflict is. And when we have this heart-brain coherence, um, it creates our heart rate variability um, starts to become varied. Our heartbeat becomes varied. And when it does, that's a good thing. A lot of people think, well, if my heartbeat is even, that's good. No, that the more it's uneven, the younger you are. When I test some of my clients that come in there with heart rate variability, we prove that just by doing breathing exercise, we can reduce their biological age by 10 years in just 6 minutes. These are the kind of things, these little things that our body has been trying to tell us, that ancients have been trying to tell us about breathing. Everybody said breathing has so much to do, and I'm proving it physiologically, for our autonomic nervous system, where the fight and the flight and the rest and digest are constantly battling. And that battling is what causes the variation in the heartbeat. And if one's more dominant, like the fight or flight, then you're going to have more stress. That's an indication of more cortisol. So yeah, so heart-brain coherence is, and the way you do it can be learned in just minutes. There's a program called Heart Math, and when I was doing my research in Spain, I reached out to Heart Math, and they sent me all the software and all the tools to be able to work with it. And of course, I started doing it myself and have found, my biological age to have reduced since I started it, several years ago, reduced 20 years, So I'm just like this really young guy, inside heart-brain coherence. And and so I always feel good doing that test. But then I find people who come in to my clinic and they're distraught, or they're having physical problems, and they could be 20 years older than their biological age. And we try to explain the five bodies of consciousness, how important meditation is, etc. And then I teach them about heart math, because we got to bypass that conflict that goes on there. And heart math is one of the only ways that I know to do that. Deep meditation can take you there, but that takes a lot of talent. That's really deep meditation. That's theta meditation. That's when you get into the theta brainwave state. And have you studied much in about brainwaves, the delta, deep sleep, and theta, alpha,
I
beta?
have a vague familiarity with it. I know the terms, and I know that when we're sleeping, that's a theta brainwave state. Alpha waves would be when we're awake. But definitely would. And I remember last time we had this conversation, you started applying those brainwave states to these different bodies. Can you elaborate
Mhm.
on that?
Sure, sure. Well, we can start at the top, and the delta brainwave state is up here in the bliss body. And we always thought when we go unconscious into deep sleep, um, into delta, our body heals itself. It does. But what happens to our consciousness? Well, we've just recently found out that we get premonitions, and we get very deep insights from the delta wave sleep. But we don't remember them, because it's when we wake up, we're filtering it through the mental body. But children um, who are nonverbal autistic don't have alpha waves, which lives here in the quantum self. And because they don't have alpha waves, they live more so in the theta brainwave state. And we're learning, and because we've learned scientifically that they're very talented, and um, can use telepathy to be able to communicate with parents and caretakers. And so when they started typing out their what's with these new iPads they have, and with predictive text, they're typing out uh, what they're learning, and we're learning that they're savants. They're incredibly smart, and they're not considered that, but they're a real gift. And so they said, you've got consciousness all wrong. It says when you go to sleep, that's where we get our insights and our premonitions. And here's a story that there was a mom of a nonverbal autistic children, and she woke up just in really upset. She goes, "What's wrong?" And she typed out that there's going to be a shooting at a school. And of course, the next day it was one of those, but it came down to her, and she didn't know what else to do. Of course, the mom was going, I don't know what to do. Maybe, is this true? Is this, is my child just, had just a bad dream? We don't know, but those are the kind of things that we're learning from nonverbals. And so the supramental body is where the theta brainwave state is. And it's also a gamma brainwave state. But we'll stick with theta, because when we go to sleep, we get into this magical, uh, dreamlike state that is rapid eye movement theta. And theta is very interesting. If you've ever heard of of lucid dreaming. That's where it happens in the theta state. So it's very magical. And we've also learned something that that's where, in that state, is where you have telepathy. And I was just listening to a podcast about a gentleman. It was on this podcast called Telepathy Tapes, and I just recommend it highly. It's so fascinating. You'll binge listen to it. Anyway, so yeah, the children were saying that, some of them were using the predictive text on their iPads in other languages, and the scientists going, how did you learn that? You've been sitting in this wheelchair, you're nonverbal. I mean, who's taught you this other languages? Nobody in your school, knows Chinese. Nobody in the school knows Russian, but you do, and it's perfect. And so what's really, really cool about that is that they said, oh, we teach each other. And they says, each other, who is each other? And they said, other nonverbal autistic children that don't even live in the same zip code. They actually can go into those deep theta states. They find each other and they meet on the place what they call the hill, and they communicate. And somebody says, my friend's not feeling well today. And a few of them will gather up and say, what's wrong? Says, my teachers don't take me serious. They think because I'm in this wheelchair and I don't have no control of my body that I'm dumb. I'm not dumb. Say, no, we'll teach you. So they teach them those languages. And to prove that, so we'll go down here to the mental body where thought and thinking are. And I'm going to tell you a story why this is so important, because between this is the right brain, which is the quantum self. This is the left brain, which is more about solving problems in cognition and things like that, while creativity is the right brain. But in the middle, there's something called the corpus callosum. Now, there was a gentleman by the name of Mr. Peck, and they made a movie about him called The Rain Man. You might not know about it, but it was a Dustin Hoffman, and he played this savant that was autistic. And what they found out about this savant is this connection between the left and right brain, which Einstein had a lot of. He had nothing. And he was able to read two books at the same time, one with his right eye and one with his left eye. And he had them memorized by the time he finished just by reading them once, because he didn't have the limitations that conditioning puts on us. And that was put on us at a very young age, from the ages of 4 to 8, during the alpha brainwave evolution of ourself. We were very susceptible. So everything in our environment was taken in. And when we do, we learn and take in the frequencies and the vibrations and the energies from our surroundings, our brothers and sisters, mothers and fathers, aunts and uncles. And their vibrations are set in with limitations. And so it put limitations on us. So we can't, anytime we have a thought or thinking, we're going to analyze it. And this is where this is really important, because this right here is the source. This is where psychedelics work. Now I'm going to Mexico to a clinic to do psychedelic research on ibogaine and 5-MeO-DMT. And I find this combination, it's the only clinic I know that does both of them at the same time. There may be others, but that's the one I know. And it's in Cozumel, Mexico. And what it is that ibogaine, the ego here in the mind, right here, is like a house, and it has everything is organized by your ego. It's everything's put in place just the way you want it. And in there is the default mode network, and it's all there, being, nice and balanced. But there is a cellar door, and the basement door is where we keep all of our hidden traumas, uh, all the things that have happened to us in the past, things that we don't want to think about. There's stuff down there. Well, ibogaine rips the door open and takes you by the hand and takes you down there to face these things. But one of the things it doesn't do, it doesn't dissolve the ego completely. Either does ayahuasca, either does LSD. They do it partially, but there's still people who say, uh-oh, that my ego says, be careful. don't go down there. This is not good. And you go, I can't help it. You know, I am going down there and there's nothing I can do about it. And I'm on this, this psychedelic. What do I do? It says run. And then they have this panic attack. And that's where it goes bad. But then they give them 5-MeO DMT, the God molecule, and it dissolves the ego. And you no longer have that. And you can face all that restructuring going on with Ibogaine about your past. And you're able to be able to sort it out and organize it in a way that it's not affecting you. And a lot of soldiers with PTSD have been going down there, and it's been said that they had a 97% success rate on severe PTSD and also severe addictions. That's a huge number. That's almost unbelievable. So I've got to go down there and do this and, and get some data on this because, this falls into our five bodies of consciousness and the source of all human suffering. And so their source of all human suffering was, the basement door is wide open and they're having to deal with it. All the thoughts are flowing through. Uh, but if those thoughts have flowed through and you don't think about them, which Ibogaine and other psychedelics teach you, then they become, if you don't think about them, they just pass these thoughts. So that's why psychedelics are going to be really powerful. Because of that, even the state of Texas, granted one of the most conservative states in the United States, has passed a bill that will allow $50 million to go to research in ibogaine research because of its powerful, really, really powerful. Have you heard about that?
Yeah, I actually just spoke with a gentleman who works with a clinic in Mexico, actually.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, he has his own channel called iboga.talks on TikTok. Definitely
Mhm.
recommend him. He's got a very colorful life. Very, very interesting person to communicate with. And I do want to go back a little bit though, because I like how you present this as downward causation versus upward causation, because with upward causation, that is where we have developed many of these ideas that we have in science about our biology, the way our brains work, although we still don't know everything about the body. There's still so much to learn. And I was just reflecting, reading an ancient text called the Corpus Hermeticum, on how historically mystical and ancient texts in the West, as a result of Christianization, many of them the mystics and the philosophers had to flee to Persia in order to retain their information. And the Renaissance in the 14th century was a recovery of many of these ancient texts, and that also ended up spurring the scientific revolution. So it's fascinating to me, number one, that these ancient texts and modalities of thought have then helped us to inform new ways of understanding upward causation. So it's through downward causation that we have learned and understood this upward causation, understanding the nature of our material bodies. And now it's almost like this reverse. Because in my research with psychedelics, in research, I say me researching scientific articles as a non-scientist. I've been noticing many trends talking about the vagus nerve. So you're mentioning the heart rate variability, and there was a study done showing that heart rate variability that occurs while under the influence of psychedelics seems to also correspond to vagal activation, and then co-activation of the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems also correspond with increased likelihood of mystical experiences. And what I mean by the co-activation is that when the fear response is engaged in that peak experience, if there is a co-activation of the parasympathetic nervous system or the rest and repair response, then it's more likely that that mystical experience will lead to positive outcomes, or at least, at the very least, a positive perception, which then corresponds with healthier attitudes and behaviors, more coping mechanisms that are actively practiced, self-care practices, etc. And so, all of this to say, we're starting to recognize that healthfulness and being healthy means creating an environment in the body that is conducive to that healthfulness. And I just want to know more about some of what you're talking about here, specifically with how we can make this more available to a scientist,
Right.
somebody who is a biologist, right? Like how is it that you are creating your experimentation? How are you collecting this data? And I hope that makes sense.
Well, yeah, it does. It does. I can tell you that the foundation uh, of how I do this is based on something uh, a chart by David Hawkins, and I'd like to share that now. So I'm going to stop sharing this and then share something else if I can. And he was, or he is. Um, Let me go back to here. He studied kinesiology, and which was really impressive. I'm just going to bring this up and share again. Okay, it's this right here. You'll find this fascinating. I don't know if you've heard of David Hawkins, uh, but he's a scientist, and he came up with this logarithmic scale. And I always pay attention to this. Is called level. And right here in the middle is called courage. And courage is, you can see it's an arrow up and an arrow down. When we get to this point, this is anything above this comes from a place of inspiration. Anything below this comes from a place of desperation. So when we get to this courage point, and I've looked and studied this while watching people do cold plunge. Um, when we've dissolved the ego, we go there right to courage, and then we start going up the scale all the way to enlightenment. Uh, if we don't get there, then we fall down the ladder to pride, anger, desire, fear. All these come from a place of desperation, and and all the seven sacred sins are there. So when we do experimentation, we want to know if people are coming from a place of desperation, or are they coming from a place of inspiration? You know, and so and our goal is to get them to the courage spot. And we've seen just, and that's our framework. That's the way that we look at this. Um, and then when we do experimentation, we're using heart rate variability, because courage will have a um, heart brain coherence. It'll have that. You've because what you've done to get there, you've created a heightened emotion with a focused intention. That in itself is the definition of manifestation. So we get to that spot, and already we started to get above courage, which is neutrality, willingness, acceptance, reason. All these things start to come into play because of that. So um, heart, heart brain coherence is really important to me to test. I know when I see somebody with a low heart rate variability, they usually are falling down here below courage. Definitely, definitely. And and I do teach my clients this. I said, you need to find something that's going to make you, um, you know, courageous, something that's going to, sometimes, I've seen, anger turn into courage, but once anger's gone, then you're just left with courage. And yeah, that's a really interesting turn of events. But yeah, that is the foundation. I also use gas discharge visualization. And GDV is something called a biowell. A biowell is something that was created by a Dr. Kortikov, who's a Russian scientist, and he still teaches about the biowell from St. Petersburg, Russia. And he is a fascinating man, and he built this box based on plasma in the 12 meridians. Um, and in doing so, we're able to measure the human biofield, all the chakra alignment, and the balance of the 12 meridians. And so that's the other thing I use in being able to measure. So if I was when I go to Mexico, I'm going to do a before. I actually wrote a scientific paper on it today. A before and after. You know, during the 7 days of how everything's aligned and the changes that go on energetically, and then heart rate variability as well. And then I'll also do electroencephalograms using a Muse headband, which just goes. A lot of people use it for meditation, but it's a scientific headband that's portable, and we don't get questioned by customs too much by this little band. So yeah, so we yeah, it's an incredible those are incredible devices. And I'll also be using something called a Sputnik, which is a little device that measures the environment of the room. And I did my dissertation measuring 100 students doing something called spinal flow. And we found out that during one of the most chaotic times when there was a lot of emotional release, that the room that became energetically quiet, even though there were screams and cries and laughter and movement. What we expected was chaos or entropy, but it was a neg entropy, meaning it became very calm, and the signal unified and it went below what we call baseline. What it would be, what we measured the empty room, this was below an empty room, and we just could we're still dumbfounded by it. But it's just one of those things that happen when groups of people get together and groups of people meditate, or groups of people go, do ayahuasca together. It's different than when you do it alone, according to the data. But I'd like to hear more about it. I don't know if you've had any knowledge about, groups doing, meditation and psychedelics together.
I've definitely got some thoughts because I'm also reflecting on churches and sacred places in general. And there's a very definitive shift in the room when you enter a sacred place that contains a lot of prayer and a lot of devotion in general. I've always noticed it's always this air of quiet and sanctity and a level of peace almost. And it doesn't matter where, as long as it's a place that is sacred and you can feel it so distinctly. And I feel it especially while under the influence of psychedelics. And I've felt that during my ayahuasca ceremonies because, in essence, the ayahuasca ceremonies are a type of meditation. Many of the ayahuasca ceremonies that I have been a part of, there are long stretches of silence during which somebody is singing. The facilitator or the firekeeper is singing, or in the Shipibo tradition, the facilitators would be singing the Icaros or the healing songs. And it's usually done with a drum, at least in the Red Road tradition. And the drum is known to be one that can induce a state of trance because you listen to a drum long enough and you start entering into a bit of a meditative state just by listening to it. And in the meantime, you're undergoing the effects of the ayahuasca, the psychedelic, and you're starting to enter into that new realm where the spirit of the medicine is being orchestrated by the facilitator to increase the vibration, to lower the vibration, to clean the energy of the room by calling on different spirits, by singing different songs. And you can feel everybody around you. And oftentimes, they told us in our ayahuasca ceremony under the tradition of the Red Road that we are not allowed to cross the path of somebody's purge because the idea is that when somebody is ready to purge, they are facing the fire and letting the energy of the fire burn away the whatever the person is purging out. And if you cross that purge, then you essentially let that energy have another form to embed itself in. So all of it sounds very woo, but it's something that is felt and directly experienced when under the influence. Everybody can agree on it. And even the most skeptical of scientists that I've met on those journeys, they feel it too. And they struggle to even try to describe it and use the confines of their skepticism and language of downward or upward causation science to try to define it as it's just the molecule that's working its magic and making me think this. But it's definitely a palpable thing. And I've experienced it too in different yoga programs that I've been a part of, specifically through the Isha Foundation for myself. I really love the Isha Foundation programs for that reason. Even the online course, you feel it coming through the screen because of the way that it is organized and the way that it is set up. And I can't really explain that, but I love that there are these new tools, and it makes me think about how this essence of creativity we're lacking in the materialist reductionist perspective, right? When we're creating hypotheses or thinking about things as just a causal result of something that is materially happening in the body, we lose that sense of creativity of the things that come from the outside in,
Right.
other than viruses or bacteria. When there is a shared human experience of many of these different aspects of beingness. So those are my reflections. I
Oh, I like that. I like that. There's a a book called The Power of Eight by Lynn McTaggart. I don't know if you've ever heard of Lynn McTaggart. Um, she's she's reports on quantum medicine and metaphysics. And as a reporter, she's written books and done a lot of investigative reporting and won the trust of some of some of the most influential people that are in our field. And she would follow the research done on people in groups of eight or between 6 and 12, but they came up with the power of eight, that were doing meditations together, that were doing prayers together to be able to help somebody in a different location. And they would measure the people in that location, even their DNA, and show remarkable changes during that time. And she also did research on large group meditations that were meditating for world peace and what was going on, during the time when they were the frame time when they were praying for world peace or meditating for world peace, and they showed a decline in violence and things like that. They've done it for communities, they've done it for cities, and they've noticed significant changes that you can see statistically. So it's very powerful. I call it collective coherence. And collective coherence is when, we get the energy, those feelings that you're feeling is a frequency, it's an energy, it's an amplitude. And when two of these frequencies of the same size meet, they double in size. And that's called constructive interference. And when they double in size, they become more powerful. Now add 8 people, add 100 people, add 200 people, and it has an influence. And we know this because we looked at the data from a satellite, geoorbital satellite that NASA had that measures the Earth's electromagnetic field, the Schumann frequencies, which is about 7.8. And it spiked on 9/11. It spiked. And that is nothing but heart-brain coherence, where people were, you know, actually pouring out heart-brain coherence. Of course, not everybody, but most of the world was so much it influenced the electromagnetic field of the Earth. That's powerful medicine. That's really powerful. And I think that more like people like yourself who are out there talking about, yeah, unifying and using different ways to for us to get together to accomplish this in fun ways. I think it's just there's just I'm glad there's a following. I'm glad that people are starting to pick up on this because, like you said, things are changing. We feel the dynamic. We feel the shift going on, and this shift is we're starting to go back and look at ancient modalities um, with modern metrics. And we're seeing a paradigm shift. And it's fascinating as the new computers come on, the quantum computers that can, are being now considered to see multi dimensions. They're coming into focus, and scientists are stepping back and say maybe this woo woo isn't so woo woo anymore. You know, it's getting pretty incredible. So yeah, we're looking at that, and it's becoming more and more fascinating.
It truly is. We see it even in astrology, for example, because it's only since the 90s that astrologers have even started looking back to how Hellenistic astrology was practiced. And the Vedic astrology is more of an unbroken lineage that more closely resembled how astrology was practiced by the ancients. And I'm talking first century BC, very long time ago, over 2000 years. And it's only now that we're incorporating Hellenistic astrology from a modern perspective. And it's reflected in so many different levels, is what I'm trying to say. It's in medicine, in science, in astrology, in psychology, in the way that we interface with one another. And at this point, it does sound almost like a fantastical science fiction novel with all of the new discoveries that are coming out. But how do we adapt, and how do we adapt to how much weirder things are becoming?
Yeah, my philosophy is stay curious. Just like you're doing is we need to stay curious. We need to start looking for those little avenues and share them when we've gone three steps forward and one step back. We said, this is the way forward, but there's so much to learn. There's so much out there that it's hard to just focus in on one thing because you feel like you're missing out on all the rest. That's why I think that the research is so good, and I've started working on things like psychedelics and Alzheimer's and nonverbal autistic children and these psi type of phenomena. It has, that's always been very interesting, but now it's becoming more mainstream. I mean, the Monroe Institute, which has been around for a while. You can take a class online where you learn how to bend spoons with your mind. It's actually I learned that it's not your mind, but it's heart, brain coherence, and you start to bend, things like that. And it's going, now we're starting to, put a little bit of science behind this, and that's pretty incredible. It's pretty incredible. I think it's fantastic.
How do you foresee something like quantum medicine actually becoming more relevant in the mainstream science?
Yeah, well, we have to go. It's going to happen fast, within the next 5 years, 10 for sure. It's because quantum computing, I don't know if you've heard, but it's a very powerful computer. It once recently solved a problem that would have taken a normal supercomputer 10 times 10 to the seventh, 10 times 10 uh, to the I don't remember what power is 10 septillion years, which is you know way before our universe began, and it'll be gone and recreated at another time in that many years. But it took it that, it did in 5 minutes what a normal computer would take that long. So when we say, that, what is the answer to this problem? Within minutes, it's going to run a billion simulations with every kind of psychedelic, with every kind of meditation, and it's going to come up with this is the answer, literally in minutes, and it's going to be super powerful, and it's going to be bespoke, and you're going to be able to be able to find out, what the problem is. And we start to say, what about life? Can we turn back the clock? Can we stop the clock? Well, the answer is coming, and it's coming soon. And so we're looking, there's been talk about mental illness being cured within the next 5 to 10 years. It's because, the answer is there. They're getting that close. So yeah, looking at a lot of really powerful um, modalities that will be investigated by quantum medicine and quantum by the use of quantum computing. So yeah, a lot coming forward.
I can't help but think great power comes with great responsibility. And what are all of the ethical dilemmas that we're going to be facing? And especially knowing what we know now of the ancient wisdoms just on their own, there's such a powerful shift that can happen in somebody who follows these ancient modalities or commits themselves to austerities and meditation and all the stories of the gurus and what happens with enlightenment and the ascended masters and miracles, right? So now that we're seeing this come back into our awareness, what was once a miracle now can be harnessed, explained on a much broader scale. So how what is going to come of that?
I know. And just recently, when in the last 20 years, we've had cell phones where we can, do video calls just like this, around the world, in two different, isolated places. It's just phenomenal what has come around, and it's not stopping. It's going, and it's exponential. And of course, when you say that we need great responsibility for these very powerful tools, you're absolutely right. And the powers that be are really outside of science. They're more political. And governments want this. Governments want to be the one, want to be the dominant. And so I think that's where our dilemma in the future is going to lie. Is what kind of regulations? Is it really going to be for the people, or is it going to be for military? What's it going to be? Um, I just you just hope that calmer minds will overcome.
Well, I'm definitely sending my heart-brain coherence in that direction toward peace and a
Absolutely.
calm
Oh my gosh.
resolution of conflict. Yeah. Well, I do want to be respectful of your time. We have about 6 minutes left. I am realizing that an hour is not nearly enough time to talk about these things. But in honor of your time, do you have any closing thoughts or anything that you want to direct people towards to follow along on these developments?
Yeah, I think that if if I wanted to, if people wanted to dive deeper into this, Amit Goswami is the one that I've followed, and I learned under him when he was my professor, and uh, you know he's got a real handle on a new paradigm. And I would encourage people to look at he's looking at um, things like reincarnation and karma from a quantum physics perspective. And I did a podcast on that, and it's one of the most fascinating subjects I ever found. And I didn't know it could be explained through quantum physics, and it very well quantum mechanics, and it very well can. Um, Whenever I mention that, my physics friend says that that you can't linear thinkers are not going to think outside the box. Um, and they'll defunct even the double slit experiment and whatnot. So anyway, I'm just saying that you're always going to have skeptics. Um, follow your path. Um, be curious. You know, stay curious. Look under every rock, no matter what it is. Do it smartly. And since our subject was, around the idea of psychedelics, certainly make sure um, that you're in a safe place with some knowledgeable people that have good intentions.
Thank you. That seems to be a common theme that's popping up is to stay malleable, be like the bamboo, and definitely in a world where identity is so important to people, that is another thing that we're going to start seeing crumble a little bit is what does identity even mean?
Hmm.
And especially in the context of this quantum medicine reality, I think we'll have a new way of understanding who we are and how we can be healthier. And I really appreciate your time, and I am definitely inviting you back on. This conversation is not over. I still have so many more questions, and next time maybe I will book out a longer period that we can
Absolutely.
keep
I enjoyed
evolving
talking
this.
to you. Yeah. Well, I'm going to Mexico July the 6th, and I'll be there for 14 days. And I'd certainly like to come back and tell you about our experiences and the data and things that we've come up with and go from there. But oh, yeah, one last little tidbit we learned about ibogaine is done by Dr. Williams at Stanford University. His studies showed that for each event that every ibogaine um, session that took place, that their brain became younger by 5 years. So, they're going through three of these during, a 7 day program, and that's like 15 years that you've become the Benjamin Button in the mind. You start going backwards in time, which is really cool. Anyway, I'll leave you that little tidbit and just know everything out there is fascinating.
That is really cool. I would be curious about the ayahuasca side of things as well.
Yeah, yeah. I'm looking
Well,
forward. Let me know. I'd be interested in doing some research on that, and especially if there was an event happening that would just let me measure the room. Even experience. It'd all be fantastic.
yeah, absolutely. I will actually reach out to you with a place that might be interested and welcoming to a person like you. So I'll reach out to you privately about that.
Thank you.
All right.